The purpose of this video is to provide a demonstration of how a simple PFaroe setup can be completed, providing you have all of the source data to hand with your setup. I'm starting here with a blank canvas for a training client, and I'm going to demonstrate in the next 10 minutes or so how you can complete a PFaroe setup and fully populate the dashboard by completing 3 main areas. The first is the liabilities alpha setup. The second is the payment schedule, which sits between the liabilities and the assets. And the third is by inserting your asset allocation. I'm going to start with the liabilities setup alpha screen. There are separate guides on PFaroe which go into this in far more detail than I'm going to manage here. But suffice to say, for the purpose of this example, I'm going to create a new alpha header. I'm going to type in a basis name and a basis type that will determine my default assumptions that come up. I'm going to give it a date. I'll give it a version number in the description. Now, within the alpha setup in PFaroe liabilities, you've got 2 main options for your cash flows. You're either going to be inserting existing cash flows, or you're going to be back solving from sensitivity data to create a cash flow profile. Here I'm going to briefly demonstrate both. Please note that for PFaroe Lantern users there's a third option, which is using PFaroe Lantern to generate member level valuations that then can create a cash flow profile driven off that. I'm going to give my new cash flow profile a name and a description. We have the inflation reference month and first increase date. Firstly, I'm just going to demonstrate how you might generate back solve cash flows from sensitivity data. Let's say we've got £100 million in each of active deferreds and pensioners. I won't fill in normal cost here, but you could input a normal cost as well. I'm going to use a default estimation for benefit payments. I'm going to input just some sample discount rates and inflation rates. We can also enter in the impact from discount rate and inflation stresses. For this short example, I'll generate off a default. What this is going to do is back solve for cash flow profiles to fit that example, and just to show you how you could insert cash flows in this manner. This is especially appropriate for if you only had information from a pension scheme's published accounts, for example. And then we have our cash flow profile generated. Note we've got a mix of inflation linked and non-inflation linked benefits for each of active deferred and pensioners from this. I'll actually delete these and show you the other alternative, which is to insert cash flow profiles that we have ourselves. So either of these is an option. If we're inserting our own cash flows, we can select paste from Excel. I'm then going to paste in one set for each of actives, deferreds and pensioners, selecting an indexation type for pre and post retirement. So I'll start with my active cash flows. Here I'm pasting in a cash flow set from Excel just by using Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V. So I'll click OK. They're my actives. Paste in one from deferreds. And select my pre and post retirement indexations as before. And lastly, another for pensioners, which will only be one dimension because they're all in payment. Bear in mind, of course, you can paste in any number of combinations that you have for your member types and for different indexation combinations, but here I'll stick with a simple example. So if we have our 3 cash flow types there, we then get an indicative PV down the bottom here. Bear in mind this is only indicative based on an interest rate at this point. Next, we can load up a default existing assumption set, which we can edit to fit the particular basis we want to model. I'm going to leave this unchanged, so I've got a pre-retirement spread and a post-retirement spread over and above the gilt curve, and I've got a gilt RPI curve modelled for RPI and associated economic conditions. We can move on to our other liability inputs. We can alter our expenses. The curve exposure configuration will drive off this template as well. If we had accruals, we can alter the decay factors from years 1 to 10. I can choose whether to calibrate. So for this example, I'll choose not to calibrate, but if we wished, we could put in the calibrated PV as at the source date, but was originally calculated in the valuation. We've got our risk configuration, so this is how we map onto the GEMS scenarios. Also our ALM configuration that we can input to be the same as risk. Our roll forwards, I'll stick with the defaults here. Next up, we can preview our valuation, both at the source date and also at a later date of our choosing if we want to see how it is due to roll forward through time. And lastly, we can click to publish our valuation. So I'm going to click to publish each of valuation, risk and ALM. Please note that running the valuation here will also run curve exposure calculations, sensitivities and analysis of movement if applicable as well. Please note I'm only going to publish the initial date to begin with for reasons that will become clear. Once that is published, please note the headers become locked. And we can also monitor the progress of the processes we've set out in the tracking tab here. Next up, I'm going to populate my payment schedule. This will allow a consistent roll forward of assets and liabilities over time from my source date. I'm going to pick the 15th of the month for the default date for benefit payments and contributions. The easiest way to set up the payment schedule is to download a template that is based on the liability valuation that you've just input. So I've just input a 31 March 17 valuation. I'm going to pick the day after that, and I'm going to pick my default benefit payments to be based on the single valuation I've just published. In clicking OK here, a payment schedule template to show you what this looks like. This then contains the benefit payments from my run. If I wish, I can add in expected contribution information into those columns into the future as well, which will impact for roll forwards and for running ALM. I can paste that data into the payment schedule, click publish, and this will then have published my payment schedule. The benefit of this is that from now on, the roll forwards on the liabilities and the assets beyond 31 March 17 will be run on a consistent basis with respect to benefit payments. Please note I can perform individual edits here by clicking edit, or I could go back and download an entire spreadsheet if I wanted to make wholesale changes. Following this, I can now repopulate the rest of my liabilities, ensuring that it's based on this payment schedule information. So I would suggest that you go back into your locked header, back to the Publish tab. I can then click to run my intervening months, running risk and ALM on the most recent date. I can also click for valuations to be ongoing for, in this case, November 17 end month and beyond. I can also click for this template to be run for daily valuations. So I'm going to click publish to all of those. The third step will be to input an asset allocation. Similar to liabilities, I need to pick a date that I have my source assets as at. I'm going to pick the same date for this example, but of course it could be a different asset as at date, and you can update this as and when you get new information around assets. I'm going to pick some UK proxy assets here, so some simple examples of my fixed income assets, some corporate all stocks. We could add derivatives, swaps as well. I'll add some equities to the mix, some property, and lastly some cash. On the right hand side here, we've got two options for entering the information. We can either enter market value in each of these to build up to a total asset value, or we can build up to a percentage of a total. So for brevity, I will do that here. So just a very simple example here, building myself up to 100%, some very easy investments, say 10% in cash. So we've now got 100% in our sample asset value. We're going to click to publish that. I'm going to click ongoing, which means it's going to run from 31st of March right through until the future. This will also generate daily valuations. That allocation will then go away and publish. Lastly, we can set up our daily metrics based on the daily valuations that we've run as well. Within daily metrics, we can choose to create some standard defaults. So funding level, assets and liabilities, and surplus deficit being some easy defaults on the basis that we've published so far. I'll choose my default early date, set to ongoing, and click save. That will run the daily metrics in addition to the metrics we've already run. In the tracking tab here, we will see the other components that are still running. So for example, we've still got our sensitivities, which comprise the bottom right of the dashboard, and our curve exposures, which underpin the hedge ratios on the bottom left of the dashboard, still running. In tracking tab, we can see those processes that have already completed in this short video in a matter of minutes. So several curve exposures have already generated, ALM sensitivities, and our alpha valuations. So hence, if I click to an earlier date, we should see a complete dashboard. For example, 31st of March. Completes our sensitivity analysis, our hedge ratios, and our value at risk is now completed. If you have any queries arising from the content in this video, please contact us via support@riskfirst.com.